at it again.
Yeah, Mr. Palangi, you said you were born in Italy, and when did you come to the United States?
1929,
How old were you when you came?
10 years old.
When you came here, did you come because you want? Why did you come to America anyway?
My dad and my two uncles used to come to America. They would work a couple of years, and a year or two, and they would come back. And we were in the wine manufacturing field in Italy. So they'd come to America, they would earn some money, come back, and we would expand the wine business. Then when Mussolini came into power, I guess we didn't care about dictatorship. So he decided to move here to America, which he was able to do.
When you came here, you said you were drafted by the United States?
Yeah, when war was declared, I was drafted in 1945.
What were your feelings on the draft then? Was it something
My family was a very patriotic family, and I kind of felt, I felt good about it. I wanted to contribute whatever I could.
When you're drafted, you usually have to go to basic training, and you have to go to school, right?
Yes, we went to basic training for I think about 30 days in St. Petersburg, Florida. I had basic training. And then I attended the Air Force Administrative and Supply School in Washington, D.C.
When you went to D.C., what did they teach you there?
They taught us how to operate a complete supply department to supply the troops, depending on the size of the organization. And of course, the administrative part of the training was the different regulations to order supplies.
I'm sorry. After basic training, where did you go?
After basic training, I went to Wright Field, Ohio. That was the heart of the Air Force. At the time, it was an experimental base mostly.
What'd you do in Ohio?
There, I had to actually organize a complete supply department.
Were you one of the people in command then? What was your rank when you got to Ohio?
When I got to Ohio, I was just private.
Okay.
And 6 months later, I was a sergeant, and in another 6 months, I think I was promoted to staff sergeant.
After Ohio, where were you sent to?
After Ohio, then I served in the Asiatic Pacific in the Philippines, mainly in the Philippines.
So does that mean you fought at Leyte?
I participated in the Battle of the Philippines. Actually, I was not in direct combat. We supported the combat troops with supplies.
Does that mean you were on a ship for?
No, I was on land.
So you never saw any direct combat, right?
No direct combat, but I was in combat zones most of the time.
Still sounds tough. What was so you supplied the troops that fought in the Philippines, right?
In the Philippines, I was on the Luzon Island and Mindoro Island, and we supplied the troops that actually they were the fighter group, 58 Air Service Group. These were P-38s that protected the B-29 that bombed Japan.
So what exactly when you said you supplied the troops, does that mean you personally brought the ammunition and the weapons up to the lines?
No, I supplied them with clothing, food, and all of the necessary necessities.
Okay.
I did a lot of administrative work involved because I had to order material, and I was also in charge of critical equipment that equipment that became critical in any area of combat, in which if I got the orders, I would have to ship it immediately, the fastest way that we could.
Okay. What would you say was the hardest part about your administrative duties in the Philippines?
The toughest part was basically many times you had shortages. You couldn't quite supply the troops with the proper equipment. You would have to find sources and ways to get that material to supply them as quickly as you could.
What would you have to do to find the supplies that the troops needed?
Well, you would have to order through the quartermaster at headquarters. And if they were short, they'd order from other areas where they were available. And then it started the process of transportation from one area to the other until it came to the final spot where it was critically needed.
Okay. Were you ever turned down? Say you thought the troops needed this material, but the headquarters said no. Did that happen often, or?
Not too often. Occasionally, it would. We try to substitute the best we could, to keep them going. Of course, as you know, World War II was a considerably worldwide war. It was a large war going on, both in Europe and in Japan. It was worldwide. This is why supply was a critical issue, constantly, 24 hours a day. And many times we would have to find substitutions the best we could.
Did you ever have to supply the other allies, such as the Italians and the French and the British?
No, while I was stationed at Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, I was stationed there about 2 years. They had a contingent of Italian Air Force mechanics. And I can speak Italian fluently. So I was their first sergeant for about a year. And that's as close as I got to the Italians.
What were your personal opinion on General MacArthur sending the people over the Philippines?
General MacArthur was I would call him a traditional commander.
What do you mean by traditional?
100% patriotic. He was extremely patriotic. And if he gave out orders, they were direct orders. You better carry them out. Or the proper punishment was issued.
Ow.
But he was in my view, he was respected by the troops, and he was really a role model for the troops. He rallied them, he was enthusiastic, and he had a way of rallying his troops.
So, does that mean you felt that he was justified in sending the United States Army into the Philippines then?
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah, he liberated the Philippines. Philippines they're very good people. They are religious. I've had a very good experience with them.
Did you ever meet any Filipinos while you...
Oh yes, as a matter of fact, maybe 60% of my workforce in supply were Filipinos. They did all the labor part. Then also at the end of after the Philippines were liberated, of course we had Japs in the caves in the mountains, just like that terrorists in Iraq today.
Yeah.
I recall they used to get volunteers to go and try to get them out of the caves, actually with flamethrowers.
Yeah. What were your personal views on the Japanese?
I never did have I would say, a favorable the view of the Japanese. They were fanatics. Their philosophy was entirely different than our philosophy. And as you know, they had suicide bombers.
Yeah.
It's like we have today in Iraq. They would dive right into a ship.
Did you ever meet a Japanese?
Oh yes, I know. We had quite a few prisoners.
Did any of them ever speak? Could they speak to you in English, or did they attempt to?
I didn't run into many that spoke English. It was all by sign, by hands, you know.
Would the ones that were captured, would you say they were less fanatical than the others and more open to, I don't know, to cooperate with you?
My view of the Japanese was that they were considerably different than the average GI or the average American. They had different culture, had different religion. So it was very difficult to praise them what they were going to do, because they were not the average, like an average American, or even an average European. The Europeans, more or less, their culture resembles pretty close to ours, but the Japanese culture is quite different.
Yes.
That was the separation point.
Did you ever receive any medals or awards while in the Philippines?
Yep, I jotted some down here. Got it right from my discharge papers. Help you out a little bit. Got World War II, this is the decorations and medals. World War II, American Theater, Wright Field, that's where I served, in Ohio, and I got the Good Conduct Medal there. Then I served in the Asiatic Pacific Theater, got 2 Bronze Stars. Those are battle stars for the Philippine liberation. And I also served in Korea when Japan capitulated. Very shortly afterwards, I went to Korea I was there about 4 months. And I was actually processing the GI's home. They used to call my number according to the one they had enlisted or been drafted. You had a number.
And that's how you decided who would go home and when?
Right. It would process so many a day and based on the number, according to the number. I actually processed my own number. I really. And Asiatic Pacific had 2 Bronze Stars. These are battle campaigns, Southern Philippines, Luzon, and Mindoro Island. I served with the 58th Air Service Group. See, we supplied the pilots of the B-38s that protected the B-29 upon Japan.
Wow. Does that mean you actually you said you supplied materials and stuff and clothing. Did you also supply missiles and?
No, ordnance, we didn't call that ordnance. We did ammunition stuff. We supplied the basic needs, food, clothing, and equipment, some equipment. And those are 2 campaigns. State of New York gave me the merit of Medal for Merit. That's for serving in direct support of combat operations, which was supplied. And the certificate of recognition during the period of the Cold War. The period of the Cold War was from September of '45 till December 1991.
Wow.
And promoting peace and stability for the nation, for this nation. Guys want to see them? I got them all downstairs. I'll show you my office.
I'd like to see that.
Okay.
Yeah, Bronze Stars, you said you're in.
Those are battle stars.
How'd you earn those?
because I was in the compact area. To her, no, you have to be in the compact area.
Okay.
See, I didn't personally was not in compact, but I was most of the time in compact area. Because you gotta deliver supplies and so forth, you know.
As a supply person, were you ever under attack directly, or were you away from the battle most of the time?
I was considerably away from the front lines, but we had snipers at night. The Japanese would sneak in our tents, and then they would slice your throat while you're sleeping.
Wow. You must have been scared at the Philippines.
Well, you have a few reservations. Even though we have guards and everything, they sneak in anyway. You know.
Did you ever experience anything out of the ordinary as a supply? Like something you weren't prepared for that happened? Anything you tell me about that?
Yes, this was on Mindoro Island. The P-38s were the planes with the big wide tail, and they had two motors. And they were, I think, the fastest plane at the time. They flew right below the sound level. Sometimes they broke the sound level. And they protected the B-29. And they used to practice on Mindoro Island. You know, they would dive down straight. And this was on a Sunday morning. I'll never forget it. I was driving a truck with a group of Filipinos going down to the supply area. And we were watching them, and all of a sudden this particular one just never rose. Usually they come down, they disappear, and they shoot up. This one right into the ground, and that was a troop area. So when we got there, my God, it made a hole almost as big as this house, and I could see parts and bodies of all our troops.
Did you ever find out what happened? Why he didn't return back?
Probably blacked out. I didn't have a medical problem, but it's unlikely. Probably blacked out, dove right in. That one got me a little bit.
Yeah. Did that happen often? Or?
It happened in many areas, but probably that I wasn't in. But that was one at a particular time. There were a lot of crashes. We used to get B-29s come back. They come in like a injured duck. They would just out of balance. But they would come in. They were really, they really were up front fighting.
What happened at Lusa? You said this happened?
Mindoro Island was the one that, the P-38, because the P-29 was a considerably large airplane. That was a big airplane. And the islands in the Philippines couldn't hold too many. And we had to have several islands. I think basically it was about 5, 6 islands that they flew from.
Did anything different happen at the Luzon Island, or was that relatively?
Luzon was a big island, the main island in the Philippines. That's where most of the fighting took place. Some of the smaller islands, they were smaller battles and mop-up situations. You know. Luzon was the big one.
Was heat in the tropics a big factor for you as well, and the weather?
Yeah, the climate was a lot of mosquitoes. It was damp and hot. 95 degrees, 100 degrees.
Wow.
Real warm. But after the mop-up and everything, the conditions improved. It wasn't so bad.
Did you experience any shortages in water and food while there?
Now, water was fairly available. We didn't have too many problems. Clean water was the problem. Was was clean drinking water. You had to be careful.
So, well, how would it become contaminated? Would the water supply that you guys brought the troops, would that be bad, or did something happen in the middle?
Well, most of the water in the Philippines was from springs. And if there was no contamination around it, it was good water, normally.
Exceptions happen though.
Yeah. Of course, being behind the lines, you know, I didn't experience the shortages to front lines there. Because we had the supplies.
Yeah, luckily.
But it was amazing, the supply lines, the American supply lines were amazing. We really served the combat troops. That made the difference.
You're right, it did. Without the supplies, the troops couldn't have fought and nothing would have happened.
If you got no food, you can't live.
Right.
You gotta have clothing, gotta have the basics.
Were you serving with African Americans at the time too, or was everything segregated as well?
In my organization, the 58th Airs Group, we didn't have any Africans. But in California, when I was processed to go overseas, they have a main staging area. There were a lot of African Americans there. They were, at that time, they served mostly as truck drivers. Of course, today they serve in the technical areas side by side, you know.
Yeah.
But they were mainly in transportation, let's put it that way. Now at Wright Field, we had a lot of African Americans in the administrative field because Wright Field was a experimental base. And it was really the heart of the Air Force. So there was a lot of administrative activity. And we had a lot of African Americans there. And we had an unusually large quartermaster base because many troop organizations drew from this supply base. And at the supply end of it, there were a lot of African Americans. But overseas, I didn't see many.
You said Wright Base was experimental. Did a lot of people know about it then, or was it kind of?
It was kind of a secretive air base. That's where they developed the bomb sight, and the bomb sight was really a highly technical device which they didn't have before. Because with the bomb sight, they could bomb pinpoint it exactly. Before that, it was hit and miss.
Oh, are you talking about the B-29s, the high altitude bombing?
Yeah, well, in Europe would be the B-2, they had the B-24s. But the bomb sight was, that was developed at Wright Field. And also they were experimental base for airplane propellers. And huge tunnel that hummed 24 hours a day. Yeah, get used to it.
I couldn't do that. It'd be hard.
Yeah.
The noise.
So there I supplied the guard unit that protected the airport, both Wright and Patterson. There's 800 guards. They drew from my supply.
Were you?
And I had to order special equipment for them. They had special clothing.
What do you mean by special? Like?
Well, they were like policemen.
I see.
They had whistles and they had decorations, you know.
Oh, okay.
And they were all picked for size. There were 6 feet over, most of them.
Wow. It's tall.
Yeah.
When the Americans bombed the Japanese with the atomic bomb at Hiroshima, did you agree with that, or did?
When they bombed the Hiroshima, I was on Mindoro Island, It was in the month of August. Pretty sure it was the month of August. Yeah. Shortly after that, about 3 weeks after that, I was moved to Korea.
But did you agree with the bombing? Did you agree that was the right route to go?
To be honest with you, we agreed with any manner in which we could defeat Japan and come home. It doesn't matter how.
I understand.
They were a tough enemy. Iwo Jima was a tough one. Oh, and they mentioned about an incident on a Sunday morning on Mindoro Island. We used to get troops from Iwo Jima, and they would come to Mindoro to rest for a while because that was considerably away from the combat areas. And one Sunday morning, I was in a troop area, I think I was walking down, and I spotted a young guy, a young soldier, short. He had a dog, he had a cat. As I got closer and closer, finally I began to recognize him. And he lived on Friedel Avenue. And he looked at me and I looked at him. He says, "You're from Glens Falls, aren't you?"
Wow.
That was the shocker.
Wow. Small world right there. See someone from your hometown.
Yeah. And at Wright Field, I also met, I think his name was Kucher from Glens Falls. One day we were issuing clothing. I was standing there, and there he is. He come in to get his issue.
Wow.
I think his first name was Carl Kucher.
When you said you were drafted, were you with other people in Glens Falls as you were drafted, and then you guys went to your respective bases, or?
Yeah, you get drafted like, we all gathered at City Hall. We marched to the railroad station, which is on Lawrence Street. And where I worked, Jackson Manufacturing, later on, was at Jackson Manufacturing, was right across the street. Later on, I worked there for 32 years.
Long time.
So, and we were shipped to Camp Upton in New York.
How did you decide to go to the Air Force? Were you given a choice into what branch you could go to, or were you just
In my case, they gave me a series of tests, almost lasted 2 days. The first day it was mostly, they refresh you in mathematics, algebra, and so forth and so on. They give you a refresher course like. And the next day they give you all the aptitude tests. So I qualified for the Air Force according to the tests, and that's where I went.
So there's no choice in where you could go, even if...
Very little choice, unless you had a special training in some area. You might, they might consider it, you know. But unusual, they usually went wherever they needed you. I was fortunate to have those tests. And if you didn't qualify for the Air Force, then you went to the infantry. That's the way it worked.
So it's a good thing you scored well and were placed in the Air Force then.
Yeah. I was surprised because in high school I wasn't really that good, you know. But I was lucky.
Yeah. Must be pretty good to get in the Air Force.
Yeah. And from Camp Upton, they shipped us to Florida.
How hard was basic training in Florida?
It was about 30 days of basic training. It was all drilling and mostly walking and building morale and teaching how to use your firearms. But it was not an advanced course because I was chosen to go to school.
In school, you mean by going to Ohio, right? or
Well, I
officer school?
was sent to administrative school, supply and administrative school.
Okay.
And from there I went to Ohio.